Tom and I are really delighted to be with you tonight because you've asked us to talk about something that we are passionate about. Without us even doing the presentation, I think you know that an irresistible club is one that has high energy, high engagement, and high impact. But we are going to talk with you tonight about what does it mean to be an irresistible club, and how do you go about making a Rotary Club irresistible? So to get started, one of the first things we have to do is talk about this thing called club culture. You know, Rotary clubs have a product, and the product is the club experience. When we talk about club culture, that's the atmosphere, that's the feeling, that's the collection of all the attitudes, traditions of all the members in your club. And it's what a person feels when they come into your club for the very first time. If your club is gaining members, if your club has great support of the Rotary Foundation, if your club is engaged in a lot of grant activity, if you're working in all the areas of focus and the avenues of service, then your club culture is really on target. But if things are slipping or sliding or have slipped or slid in any of those, then it may be time for a culture adjustment. So for a moment, I want you to do an exercise. Now you'll see on the screen, there's a gal there with her arms crossed. So I want you to do the same thing, cross your arms. So as you did that, some of you put your left hand over your right hand, and some put your right over your left hand. So whatever you did, switch it up and do the opposite. Tom, how did that make you feel when I asked you to do that differently?
It made me feel very uncomfortable, kind of like when my wife makes me go to yoga class.
So if changing things makes people feel so uncomfortable, why are we asking Rotary clubs to think about changing?
Well, what we know, Stephanie, is that the number one reason why people leave their clubs is because of their club culture. If it's a healthy culture, they stay, they ask their friends. If it's not, they leave.
So the question is, how do you even begin figuring out how healthy is my club? Is my club irresistible? Is there something we can change? Are we okay? Or is there something we can do better? Well, the very first way to determine if your club is irresistible or if you have some work to do is to do a club assessment. It really means measuring where you are, taking a look at your club. Where are you right now? And where would you like to be? This is very much like going on a diet. Before you decide, to lose weight, you've got to step on a scale. You've got to see the starting point. And then you employ the things that you're going to do, for diet, exercise, food, whatever you're going to do. And then you get on the scale again to see if you've made any progress. That's what doing an assessment does for a Rotary Club.
So assessments are so important. And oftentimes when we get together with clubs and districts, we ask them how many have done an assessment. And so many times we find out that the district or club has never done an assessment. And then when we ask what kind of assessments to those who have conducted them, what kind they use, most of them use exit interviews. And Stephanie has an opinion about exit interviews.
I certainly do. Exit interviews are actually stupid. If you're waiting till the point where somebody has made up their mind that they're leaving your club, that's really not a great time to start asking questions about how a person feels about the club. In order to do this correctly, we think that doing an assessment once a year and talking to people as they come into your club is really more important. when a person comes into the club, that's when you want to ask them, what do you like about our club? What attracted you here? What would you like to work on? What could you tell us about yourself that we can't see on your application? That's when you get to find out what kind of expectations people have of being in your club, because people come in for different reasons. Some want the fellowship, some want service right away, some want mentorship, some are looking for networking. When you find out what people want, you have a better chance then to select your speakers, your socials, your projects, and you're going to hit on something from time to time. Now, the other thing to do is to talk to the current and existing members of your club once a year. And that way, you're going to get feedback from the people while they are members. And you're going to get information that lets you understand what's the majority of your club thinking and feeling about how you're doing business.
I couldn't agree with you more, Stephanie. It's interesting because if we only do exit interviews, well, people may not tell us the honest answers. I mean, Rotarians are nice people. They might not tell you why they're really leaving. But even if they did, really, we don't have enough time to change that attitude or behavior before they leave. And Stephanie's right. Once a year, it's a good time because if you think about it, our culture is always changing. We have new people coming into Rotary. We have people leaving Rotary. So your culture today may be different than your culture a year from now. So Stephanie, do you want to tell them your story about the New York mayor?
Yeah, some of you might be old enough to remember the New York City mayor by the name of Ed Koch. And Ed Koch was very, very um, uh, fond of walking around his city and saying, "How am I doing? How am I doing? How am I doing?" He'd ask it in the supermarket. He'd ask it in the subway, and it was his way of trying to find out one-on-one from his constituents about his performance. And we should be doing the same thing with our Rotary Club members. We should be asking them, how are we doing? Tom, talk about the different kinds of assessments that are available.
Well, Rotary has 7 different kinds of assessments. You can Google it or you can go to My Rotary and find them out. We've talked about some of them here today, but they don't have to be complicated. If you want somewhere to start from, you can take the member satisfaction survey, which is for our members. There's assessment tools for our board of directors of the clubs. But really, it's just asking them what they want in their club. You could ask them if they like when you meet, if they like where you meet, if they like your socials, if they like your service projects, if they like how you meet. Maybe they don't want to meet in person, but they want to meet online. But really, if you have a large club with 400 people, then you may have to do an electronic survey. If you don't like the surveys that you find on My Rotary, you can cut and paste them into a Survey Monkey and you can simplify the language. But if you have a small club of only 15 or 20 people, you may want to just pick up the phone and just call them. The most important thing is to find out what they want. And then when you find out what they want, if it makes sense, you need to make that change. So as soon as you do the survey, they're going to feel like they belong because you're asking them. But if you actually make some of the changes, then they're going to feel like it's their club and they'll want to stay and they'll bring in more people. And it's funny because a lot of times we get calls with the clubs having a problem. Last year, we got a call from a president of a club, about 22 individuals. And he said that half the people wanted to do away with the 4-way test. And the other half were adamant that they wanted to keep the 4-way test. So he asked, what should I do? And we told him to do a survey and then get back to us. So the survey came back and it turned out that only 2 people responded they wanted to do away with the 4-way test. They just happened to be the loudest 2 people in the club. So it felt like it was half and half. So that president was able to go back and say, we listened to you, we listened to what you said, and the majority of people wanted to keep things the way they are. So it's not difficult to do, but it's very important to do, and it's important to do it regularly.
So when you do a survey, something will happen. You're going to find out that your club is okay the way it is, fantastic the way it is, or you may find out that, there are some things that we can probably take a look at. So just like in all other areas of our lives, we come to a point that we have to make a decision. Do we stay and work on the club and fight for it and make it irresistible, or do we decide to take off? Sometimes members take off and leave Rotary altogether. Sometimes Rotarians will leave a club and go to another club. I'm in my third club. The first Rotary club that I was in, I had a very happy experience for 10 years, but then I had a job change. So I moved to the club that was closer to where I was working. However, that club was a lunch bunch. They really didn't do anything. They didn't do community service. They didn't do international service. God forbid they do any like youth. So they didn't do anything. They simply got together to eat. Well, by that time, I was a past district governor and I certainly needed more. But you know what happened? When I would stand up and say, how about we try? They would all look down at their feet. Or I'd say, hey, can we do this? And then they, say, just, or look around. And nobody wanted to do anything. So I decided to take off and I joined the club right next door. And that's the current club I'm in, the McMurray Rotary Club. Very active, fantastic. And I've been happy in this club for over a dozen years now. So sometimes it's a matter of taking off and looking, where there might be another place that you can fit. But sometimes there's not a club. There's not a club that helps. And, you get to a point where you're frozen. You're frozen because you don't know what to do because there's nowhere to go. You realize that your Rotary Club isn't doing what you needed to do to meet your expectations. And you've looked around and there's not really a better option for you. So one of the things you can do is see if there are any spark plugs or people in the club who can help you create the kind of change you want. That's what I did wrong in my second club. I tried to change it all by myself. And again, being a past district governor, nobody really wanted to listen to me. What I should have done was look at the club members and see who might think like I do about making the club different. But then again, as we said, sometimes there's nothing you can do that will make that club better. In that case, there is some evidence to suggest that starting a whole different kind of club is going to be a better way to create exactly what you and other members like you are looking for. Tom, do you want to talk about starting a new club?
Absolutely. Now, Stephanie is part of what she calls a legacy club. I'm also part of a traditional club. There's the same definition. It's a club that meets 4 times a week, usually at a country club or a
Four
hotel.
times a month, not 4 times a week. Oh my
Oh yeah,
gosh.
that's I'm sorry, I'm thinking of my current schedule. 4 times a month. Um, But you're right, Stephanie. If we were appealing to everybody, we'd have tens of millions of people instead of just 1.4 million. So these new clubs sometimes reach out and bring those potential people of action into a club that doesn't exist currently. Now, we're not saying that we don't love our legacy clubs because we do love our legacy clubs. I would never leave my clubs. My friends are in it. I know Stephanie is very happy in her club. I've met the members of her club. They're great. She wouldn't leave either. But the great thing about these new clubs is they have some advantages that our older clubs don't have. And after starting a number of them, what we're realizing is they help Rotary grow quicker. The Rotary International Growth Committee, they study various areas of the world, and it turns out that the areas of the world that are starting more clubs than they're losing are growing. And the areas of the world that are losing membership are losing clubs and not starting new ones. So the thing about these new clubs is they grow Rotary quickly. When you start a club, you add 20 members at one time. To add 20 members to your current club might take a little time to do, especially when you're losing members along the way. They also retain members longer. Now, why is that? Well, a lot of the new clubs, actually the majority of new clubs that are being started are what they call cause-based clubs. So what's a cause-based club? It's a club that focuses around a particular cause. Their speakers are about that cause. Their service projects are about that cause. And nowadays, a lot of individuals want to focus on one cause and have a great impact on that one cause. And that's especially true with younger people, with the environment. And it's interesting because when we look at when we lose our members, we lose most of our members in the first 3 years, more than 50%. But we found out after the 3 years, people stay. Now, why is that? Well, they're like you and me. We have our friends. We would never leave our friends. But these cause-based clubs make the people stay for that cause, and it makes them stay longer. And then by the time they've working on the cause, they have those friends, and Rotary has them forever. These new clubs also attract younger and more diverse members. You know, we are all told in my generation we should go out and serve, and that's what I do in my traditional club. We rake leaves for those who need it. We make sandwiches for the hungry. We pick up trash along the highway. But if we go to a young person and say, join our club, pick up trash, it doesn't really go very far because, again, they want to focus on that one area they want to focus on. And I know what I'm talking about when I said more diverse members. You know, when I was district governor, we started 8 years. The year that I was district governor, we started 8 clubs. That year, we took our female percentage of membership from low 30s to mid 30s. And when at the end of the year, we looked at it, we did an analysis. We did that with just 3 clubs. We did it with our Eco Club that had over 50% females. We did it with our End Human Trafficking, which was over 60% females. And then we had a club called Network for Empowering Women, and they had almost 70% females. So those 3 clubs, they moved the needle for gender equality. We don't do, because we're a US-based corporation, we don't do surveys of race, but when you go on and look at the new clubs, you can see that they're more diverse. Also, these new clubs help us reach out into the community and bring in new people. You know, it's funny, when we started the first ever club to end human trafficking, about 2 weeks after that, we were inducting a person. And after the induction, I received an email from the then sitting Rotary International president, who's now our trustee-elect, Mark Maloney. And he said that was his sister that he just inducted. And he had been trying to get her into Rotary for 40 years, 4 decades. But we just didn't have a club. She was a school teacher in Turkey, and she worked during the day, so she could only meet at night. And she didn't want to work on a bunch of different projects. She just wanted to work on that. Also, these clubs actually give us an opportunity to partner with other groups in the community. We started a veterans club. This veterans club is great. It's been going for years now, and there's about a dozen of them around the world. But we have people driving 2 hours to get to that meeting because they want to have that camaraderie. But it's interesting because we met with other veterans organizations like Yellow Ribbon, VWs, Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFWs, and other organizations that were serving veterans, but they were serving them in a social way, when these clubs really want to serve veterans. You don't have to be a veteran to be in the Veterans Club. You just want to have to serve, because that's the purpose of the club. We started an autism club for people with autism and families to serve them. And we partnered up with another organization because Rotary can be a magnet for those organizations. We have these global grants, we have district grants, and sometimes they just need an organization like Rotary to bring them together. But the main thing to remember is this works with Rotary clubs, Rotaract clubs, satellite clubs. You can even have a traditional club that has a cause-based focus. But the important thing to remember is it's not hard to start them, and there's a lot of people who can help you do that.
So we've been talking about the importance of asking members, doing assessments and talking to your members and asking, how am I doing? What we're really talking about is a concept called getting buy-in. Buy-in is an important factor when you want to move the needle in your club. When your club is good, but you want to move it to great, buy-in is an important concept. Because buy-in is when we ask members in our club for their opinion. And 2 very important things will happen. You will get information. You will get information about what club members are thinking, what they're looking for, how they're feeling. Sometimes you can use some of it, sometimes you can't. But the more important thing is you've actually given people an opportunity to be heard. You know, years ago when I did an exercise with our action plan in my club, my own club, I asked them, you know, to take a look at the 4 priorities of the action plan and split them into 4 groups. And they each took one of the priorities and talked about it and how it impacted our club or what it meant for our club. And then collected all that information, and it was useful for our club board. But then I had members come up to me and say, wow, nobody ever asked me my opinion before. So that's how you create buy-in, getting information from your club members and opinions, even if you can't use them, you're giving them an opportunity to be part of the change. Now, we mentioned earlier, you heard us talk about this term influencer or spark plug. Spark plugs are important people in your club who can help you talk about the change. And these changes don't have to be
Jim Luchett's on the call.
these spark plugs and these changes don't have to be monumental changes. They can be little things, but you want to find people in your club who can help you turn your club into that irresistible experience that we've been talking about. Now, you know who they are already. You don't even have to see this list, but these are some of the things you look for. The people who are the good communicators, the ones who have the energy, they're not afraid to try things, and they're constantly being creative. These are the people that you can turn to when you have some thoughts and ideas about moving your club from good to great.
Stephanie, would you say those people have gumption?
You would say that. In addition to the spark plug, it will help if you can find a catalyst. Now, what's the difference? Well, a spark plug is a person who believes in the change, believes in the idea that you're suggesting, but the catalyst is actually somebody in your club who can help remove barriers for people to try something different. For instance, I was working with a club, and somebody asked the question, well, how many of you have an account in Rotary, in my Rotary? And very few hands went up. But there was a member in the club who said, all right, guess what? In 2 weeks, we don't have a program. We have a club assembly. I want you all to bring your iPads or your phones or something, and I'm going to show you how to get into my Rotary, and we're going to create accounts for everybody. That was the catalyst for that club.
So once you decide that you have the assessment, you get the buy-in, you're going to make a change. And it's important to make the change the right kind of way. So Rotary actually has what they call a change model. And the interesting thing about this model is it progresses in a wheel. But as you see from this diagram, you don't only go forward. Sometimes you have to go back a little bit if you haven't made enough progress in a certain step to make sure the whole change happens. And we're not talking about big changes. Sometimes it could be small changes. I remember a few years ago, we were at a president-elect training seminar, and we went around the room and we asked each president-elect, what is the one change you're going to make? And so people had some really big changes. Everybody was excited about the upcoming year. We got to one gentleman, his name was Troy. And we call him Troy the Pie Guy because he never gave us his last name. But Troy, the reason we call him Troy the Pie Guy is because he said the one change he wanted to make was he wanted to have pie for dessert. And of course, I see you all smiling and laughing, and that's what we did too. But it's interesting because we ran into Troy a few years later, and his president year was very successful, and his club grew to the second largest in the district that he was in because he went from a culture of being resistant to change to one of accepting with change because the pie went over well. And so people, wanted to make sure that they would have other ideas if they had them. They started bringing them. So they started reviewing other things, and small changes led to big changes. So sometimes it's just a small change. So the first thing you have to do is an assessment. Now, we talked about that. That's when you find out what the club wants to do, what is the problem, and also considering what kind of tools you may need to move that forward. The second is designing it. Um, Designing is when you want to increase the vision for your success. So what you do is you talk to your members, you paint the picture. You say, we're going to do this change because we want to have a certain result. Maybe you want to increase membership. So if we make it more flexible and have a satellite club, will increase membership. We want to have virtual meetings. So you can decide what kind of tools you need. You might need a soundboard, or you might need an owl camera. So that's what you're doing in the designing. Then when you go to the build, this is a very important part because it's where you communicate with your stakeholders. You have to communicate with them. You have to tell them why you believe it's a good project to start. If you don't have any examples, you can look in the Rotary magazine. You can point to examples of clubs in your district or other districts that had success by making that change. So after you assess, design, and build, then you have to implement. Now, this is an important phase, and what you want to make sure when you're implementing the change, don't come in too heavy-handed. Nobody wants to be told what to do. They want to make sure that even after the change, you're going to be valuable. And Stephanie's got a great story about a man named Byron in her second club.
In my first club, I met Byron, and Byron had been the treasurer in that Rotary Club for 34 years. Oh my God, what in the world was wrong with our club? We should have said to Byron, you've done such a great job. Can you put a manual together so we can get another person to be treasurer? And we want you to do our flag project, or to organize our gala or our golf tournament. But to have somebody in one job for 34 years was not the best thing for our club to do.
But we don't want to lose Byron. We don't lose those members. They can add a lot of value in other ways. So we just want to be thoughtful when we're implementing that change. Now, we want it to be sustainable. So if you're a governor, or you're a past district governor, you want to make a change, make sure you include the whole DG line if you're a district. If you're a club president, make sure that you include your president-elect and your president nominee. Troy didn't change to PI because he wanted to have PI 1 year. He wanted to have PI going forward. So if he includes his governor-elect, his president-elect, his president nominee, then the club will do that. Now, once you get through and you make that change and you're successful in that change, it's time to do an assessment again and do it all over again. Like we said, your culture is always changing because new people are coming in, old people, older people, previous people are leaving. So you keep on doing that. It's a wheel, you keep on working.